Hey, welcome to the Direct Action Mailbag. Today we are working through a real leadership question from someone who reached out with a communication problem inside a company dealing with large, sweeping changes. And I want to say this up front. I respect this question. I respect the way it was brought forward. This is not someone trying to take a shot at the C-suite. This is not someone trying to blame VPs. This is not someone trying to make middle management look helpless or frontline workers look difficult. This is someone standing in the middle of a real communication burden and asking a serious leadership question. How do we communicate up and down the chain when the message is fractured? Leadership wants movement, and the people closest to the front line need clear, concrete language they can actually use. That is a quality leadership question, and I want to stay disciplined with it because this kind of issue can get personal fast. Communication problems inside a company can create frustration, suspicion, and a lot of side conversations. People start asking, why did they say it that way? Why did our department hear one thing and another department heard something else? Why did my manager say one thing on Monday, then something different on Wednesday? Why is leadership moving forward if the people who have to carry the message are not clear yet? Those questions are real. But the minute we turn those questions into accusations before we inspect the system, we weaken the read. So we are not going to do that here. We are going to show respect to the person who brought the issue forward, and we are going to show respect to everyone inside the chain. Senior leaders may be under pressure we cannot see. VPs may be translating direction that is still developing. Middle managers may be trying to protect their teams from confusion, while also protecting the organization from misinformation. Frontline workers may be asking direct questions because they need to know what the change means for their actual work. Those positions are different. They are not automatically enemies. What I am going to work through with you today is this: too many stories. What do we tell the team? Here's the situation as I understand it. Communication is fractured between the C-suite and the rest of the organization. Middle management is hearing too many stories, and they are trying to figure out which message they are supposed to disseminate to their staff. The urgent need is clear and consistent messaging. The entire company is affected, but the burden is being felt heavily by middle management because they are the layer expected to turn senior level direction into frontline understanding. Something has already been tried. The person who brought this forward has gone to the VP level to discuss how the organization can have clearer communication when addressing company-wide issues. That matters. This is not someone quietly complaining from the sidelines. This is someone trying to move the issue through the chain in a responsible way. The constraint is also clear. There is leadership pressure to move forward. The company is dealing with large changes. Staff need awareness. The decision this person is trying to make is how to best communicate up and down the chain. The good outcome is not vague. They want messaging that is clear, concrete, sensible, and easy enough for frontline workers, middle managers, and senior leaders to discuss without creating 5 different versions of the same reality. That is the frame. Now we are going to apply the direct action order cleanly. CSA, Deepen, Pro, ACE, TMC, PACE, and BRAIN. Not as a classroom lesson, not as a formal lecture. We are going to use the system to think through the leadership issue in order, with enough detail to be useful and enough discipline to avoid turning this into blame. So let's start with CSA. Comprehensive Situation Assessment is where we slow the read down before we start solving. The visible issue is fractured communication. That is the surface. But the first leadership mistake would be jumping straight from fractured communication to a conclusion about fault. That would be too thin. It might feel satisfying for about 30 seconds, but it would not fix the system. So instead of starting with blame, we start with the read. What do we know? We know the company is facing large, sweeping changes. We know communication from the C-suite is not landing consistently enough for middle management. We know middle managers are hearing too many versions of the story. We know they are not sure which version to carry to their staff. We know the whole company is affected. We know the pressure is landing hard in the middle. We know someone has already elevated the concern to the VP level. We know the desired outcome is clear, concrete messaging that can move up and down the chain. That is what we know. Now, what do we not know? We do not know if the C-suite is fully aligned privately. We do not know if the message has one executive owner. We do not know if the change itself is fully decided or still developing. We do not know if legal, HR, finance, operations, compliance, customer operations, or communications need to approve parts of the message. We do not know if different VPs are interpreting the same executive direction in different ways. We do not know if middle managers have received official talking points. We do not know if frontline workers are hearing information before their direct leaders are prepared to explain it. We do not know if the same questions are repeating across departments without a formal answer loop. That incomplete picture matters, because if we do not separate what is known from what is assumed, the organization can end up solving the wrong problem. If the problem is executive misalignment, the correction is one thing. If the problem is unclear translation at the VP level, the correction is different. If the problem is a missing manager brief, that is different again. If the problem is that the change is still developing and leaders are speaking too early, that requires a different control. If the problem is that frontline questions are not being captured and answered, that is another failure point. Same symptom, different cause, and the symptom is fractured messaging. The cause still has to be assessed. This is where leaders need patience, not slow patience. Disciplined patience, the kind of patience that says, before I solve this, I need to know where the chain is actually breaking. Because sometimes the message is clear at the top, but weak in translation. Sometimes the message is clear in a meeting, but not clear enough to repeat. Sometimes the message is correct strategically, but useless operationally. Sometimes senior leaders understand the business reason, but middle managers need the people-facing version. Sometimes the company knows why the change is happening, but nobody has converted that into, what do I say to my team tomorrow morning? That gap is not small. That gap is where trust gets damaged. Now widen the view. From the C-suite view, there may be strategic pressure. Senior leaders may be dealing with market pressure, financial pressure, customer pressure, board pressure, staffing changes, restructuring, policy shifts, compliance concerns, or operational urgency. They may need the company to move before every detail is fully comfortable. That does not excuse unclear communication, but it helps us understand the pressure at that level. A C-suite leader may be thinking, we cannot delay this change. We already know enough to move. The business risk is bigger if we wait. The board wants action. The market is shifting. Costs are rising. Customers are changing. The organization has to adapt. That may be true, but senior level urgency does not automatically become frontline clarity. That translation has to be built. From the VP level, the issue may be translation. VPs may be receiving executive intent and trying to turn it into functional direction. One VP may be thinking about people impact. Another may be thinking about operational timing. Another may be thinking about customer impact. Another may be thinking about budget. If those translations are not reconciled, the same change can start to sound different depending on which leader is speaking. That does not mean the VPs are careless. It may mean each one is carrying the message through the lens of their function. Operations hears workload. HR hears staffing and policy. Finance hears cost and timing. Customer operations hears service risk. Legal hears exposure. Communications hears wording. Middle management hears all of it, and then has to stand in front of the team like there is one clean answer. From the middle management view, the problem becomes practical. Middle managers need to know what to say. They need to know what is confirmed. They need to know what is pending. They need to know what not to speculate on. They need to know where to send questions. They need to know when the next update is coming. If they do not have that, they are forced into a bad position. They either repeat vague language, improvise, avoid the conversation, or tell the truth that they do not know. Sometimes that last one is honest, but if it happens too often without an update rhythm, trust starts to weaken. Middle management is where strategy becomes conversation. That is why this burden is heavy. A senior leader can say, we are moving toward a new operating model. A middle manager has to answer, Does that change my shift? Does that change my role? Does that change my supervisor? Does that affect my workload? Does this impact hiring? Are we losing people? When does it start? What should I stop doing? What should I keep doing? Those are different levels of language. If the organization does not prepare managers for those questions, managers become forced interpreters. And forced interpretation is where message drift begins. From the frontline view, the concern is immediate impact. What changes for me? What changes for my team? What do I do differently? Is my job affected? Is my schedule affected? Is my supervisor telling me the same thing another department is hearing? Is this final? Who do I trust? What happens next? Those are not bad questions. Those are normal questions from people trying to operate inside change. That is the CSA read. This is not just a communication issue. It is a message control issue. The organization does not only need more communication, it needs cleaner control of message source, message sequence, message authority, and message feedback. That distinction matters. A communication issue says people need to talk more. A message control issue says we need to know who owns the message, what is confirmed, what is pending, who is allowed to say what, how managers get prepared, where questions go, and how updates are corrected. That is sharper. That is more useful. Now that the read is clearer, we move to deepen. Deepen is where we determine what kind of problem navigation is needed. The wrong move would be treating this as one big emotional complaint and trying to solve it with a generic communicate better reminder. That does not work. Communicate better is not a plan. It is a wish with better clothes on. So what deepen strategy fits? The first fit is in-depth analysis, not because we need to spend months studying this, because the organization needs to understand where the communication chain is breaking. Is the fracture happening before the message leaves the C-suite? Is it happening when VPs translate the change into departmental meaning? Is it happening because middle managers are not pre-briefed? Is it happening because frontline questions are not being captured? Is it happening because confirmed and pending information are mixed together? Is it happening because the company is using broad language when people need operational language? In-depth analysis is appropriate because the situation has ambiguity, multiple layers, and real consequence if the wrong fix is applied. But I want to be clear. In-depth analysis does not mean paralysis. It does not mean form a committee, wait 3 months, and produce a communication report nobody uses. That is not what I mean. In this case, in-depth analysis may be simple and direct. Pull together the last 3 messages that went out. Compare them. Ask middle managers what questions they cannot answer. Ask which versions they are hearing. Ask which terms are unclear. Ask whether managers know what is confirmed and what is pending. Ask whether the front line heard the update before managers were ready. Ask whether the source of truth exists. That can be done quickly. The goal is not to admire the problem. The goal is to locate the break. The second fit is surgical approach. Once the break point is identified, the correction should be precise. Do not redesign the entire communication system if the immediate failure is that middle managers do not have approved talking points. Do not blame middle management if the issue is that they are receiving partial information from 3 sources. Do not flood the company with more emails if the issue is that no one knows which message is official. A surgical approach targets the exact failure point with minimal disruption. For example, if the break is at executive alignment, the surgical fix is an executive message alignment meeting, not a company-wide memo yet. If the break is at VP translation, the surgical fix is a function-level translation review where each VP aligns their wording back to the core message. If the break is at middle management, the surgical fix is a manager brief before the next announcement. If the break is at frontline questions, the surgical fix is a question capture and answer loop. If the break is rumor, the surgical fix is a reset statement and source of truth. Do not use a hammer where the problem needs a scalpel. The third fit may be tactical resolution. If confusion is already spreading and employees need something now, the organization may need a holding message. A holding message is not the final answer. It is a controlled temporary message that prevents rumor from becoming the operating plan. It can say, here is what is confirmed. Here is what is still being worked through. Here is what has not changed. Here is what employees should continue doing. Here is when the next update will come. That stabilizes the environment while deeper answers are prepared. And I want to underline this because leaders often resist holding messages. They think a holding message sounds weak because it admits incomplete information. I disagree. A strong holding message is not weak. It is disciplined. It tells people what is true right now, what is not ready yet, and when they can expect the next update. That is much better than silence. Silence is not neutral. When leadership goes quiet during major change, people do not stop thinking. They fill the gap. They talk to peers. They compare notes. They interpret fragments. They build meaning from whatever information is available. That does not mean they are bad people. That means the organization left too much room for uncontrolled interpretation. The fourth fit may be critical intervention, but only if the stakes are high enough. If the communication fracture creates legal risk, safety risk, staffing risk, customer risk, compliance risk, labor risk, or operational continuity risk, leadership may need to step in immediately with a single approved statement and a pause on informal messaging. That should not be the first move for every communication problem. But if the message drift creates serious risk, it becomes necessary. For example, if managers are giving different answers about staffing changes, that can create fear and legal exposure. If customer-facing teams are hearing different policy changes, that can create customer impact. If safety procedures are changing and the message is inconsistent, that is not a normal communication issue anymore. That is a risk issue. If compliance language is being interpreted differently across departments, the organization cannot let that float. So the deepen read is this. Start with in-depth analysis to locate the break. Use surgical approach to fix the exact failure point. Use tactical resolution if a holding message is needed now. And reserve critical intervention for high-risk confusion. Now we move to Pro. Pro asks what risk this communication problem creates across personal, role, and organizational dimensions. This matters because fractured communication is easy to underestimate. Leaders may think, we just need to get the message out. But the risk is deeper than that. Start with personal risk. Middle managers are at risk of losing credibility with their teams. That may sound soft, but it is not. Credibility is operational currency. If a manager has to keep walking back prior statements or keep saying, I do not know, or gives one version Monday and another version Wednesday, the team may start believing the manager is either uninformed, withholding information, or unreliable. That may not be fair, but it happens. Middle managers can also experience stress because they are accountable to senior leaders for message discipline, while accountable to their teams for practical answers. That puts pressure on their confidence in their relationships with employees. And this is one of the most difficult positions in leadership. The middle manager may not be making the decision. They may not own the strategy. They may not control the announcement. But they are often the person who has to stand in front of the team and absorb the questions. That creates emotional and professional exposure. They can look weak because they were not equipped. They can look evasive because they do not have authority to answer. They can look inconsistent because the message changed after they repeated it. That is personal risk. Not because the manager is fragile, because credibility is part of the job. Now, role-related risk. The manager's role is to translate direction into execution. If the message is unclear, the manager cannot perform that role cleanly. They cannot align the team. They cannot answer basic questions. They cannot separate rumor from instruction. They cannot reinforce priorities with confidence. They cannot tell people what changes now versus what changes later. That creates role risk because the person is being asked to execute communication without the required message authority or message clarity. A manager in this position may start avoiding the topic, not because they do not care, because every conversation feels like a trap. If they speak too soon, they may be wrong. If they wait, the team feels ignored. If they repeat broad language, the team asks practical questions. If they answer practical questions without authority, they risk creating a new version of the message. That is a role failure created by weak structure. The role needs support. The manager needs a message they can carry. Now, organizational risk. This is where the issue gets serious. Fractured communication can weaken trust, slow execution, increase rumor, create inconsistent customer-facing answers, disrupt team morale, damage change adoption, and expose the company to compliance or legal risk if sensitive information is mishandled. If the company is implementing large sweeping changes, unclear messaging can also create operational drift. One department starts preparing for one version of the future. Another department prepares for another version. Frontline teams begin making decisions based on partial understanding. That is how change loses control. Organizational risk also shows up in morale. People may start believing leadership does not know what it is doing, even if leadership is working hard behind the scenes. They may start believing managers are hiding information, even if managers are asking the same questions they are. They may start believing another department has inside information, even if that department only heard a different interpretation. Trust can degrade, even when nobody intends harm. That is why this issue deserves attention. It is not about communication preference. It is about execution risk. So the pro read is clear. This is not just discomfort in the middle. It is a risk to credibility, role execution, and organizational alignment. That does not mean anyone is malicious. It means the communication system is carrying more risk than it should. Now we move to ACE. ACE is where we test assumptions before we lock the solution. This is important because communication problems are emotionally charged. People hear different stories. Frustration builds. Middle managers feel exposed. Frontline workers feel uncertain. Senior leaders feel pressure to move. When that happens, assumptions start hardening into facts. The first assumption is senior leadership is communicating poorly. Maybe. That may be true, but we need to test it. What evidence supports it? Are executives giving different explanations? Are VPs receiving different direction? Are broad announcements missing practical details? Are managers repeatedly asking for clarification and not receiving it? Are changes being communicated before the organization has a controlled cascade? Now, what evidence could complicate that assumption? Maybe senior leaders have one strategic message, but it is not being translated into operational language. Maybe the message is aligned at the top, but loses clarity at the VP level. Maybe the decision is still developing and leaders are trying to balance transparency with uncertainty. Maybe the issue is not bad communication from the top, but a missing manager translation layer. That distinction matters, because if you walk into a VP conversation saying, the C-suite is not communicating, that may trigger defensiveness. But if you say middle managers do not currently have one approved message they can carry to staff, that is harder to dismiss. It is more precise. It is more respectful. It names the failure point without accusing the people. The second assumption is middle managers are spreading too many versions. Maybe some are, but again, test it. Are they actually inventing different stories, or are they hearing partial information from multiple leaders? Are they trying to answer team questions without a source of truth? Are they repeating what they heard in good faith? Are they adding interpretation because no official talking points exist? If middle managers are improvising, that may be a behavior issue, but it may also be a system signal. Improvisation often means the structure did not arrive in time. The third assumption is frontline workers are confused because they resist change. That is a dangerous assumption. Maybe some people resist. That happens. But confusion is not the same as resistance. Asking, what does this mean for my job, is not resistance. Asking, when does this start, is not resistance. Asking, why did another department hear something different, is not resistance. Those are legitimate questions inside a change environment. If the organization treats confusion like resistance too early, it may damage trust and miss the real message gap. The fourth assumption is one more email will fix it. Probably not. If the issue is message control, one more email may add another version to the pile. The fix is not more communication by volume. The fix is communication by sequence, authority, and clarity. The fifth assumption is every message has to be complete before anything can be said. That is also not true. People often confuse clarity with completeness. You can be clear about incomplete information. You can say, this part is decided, this part is not decided yet. This part does not change today. This is the next update date. That is clear. It is not complete, but it is honest and controlled. The sixth assumption is the front line does not need the strategic reason. Be careful with that. The front line may not need every executive detail, but they usually need enough why to understand that the change is not random. People do not need a 30-minute strategy brief every time something changes. But they do need a clean reason that connects to the work. If the change affects workflow, staffing, customers, policy, schedule, quality, safety, or service, the explanation needs to respect that. ACE keeps the organization honest. It says, do not blame the top without checking translation. Do not blame the middle without checking structure. Do not blame the front line without checking clarity. Do not assume communication volume equals message control. Do not confuse incomplete with unclear. Do not confuse questions with resistance. Now we move to TMC. TMC is where we decide how the work should be tasked and how communication should actually move. This is the operational heart of this episode because the problem itself is communication flow. If the organization is facing large changes, it needs a communication method that matches the risk. Some parts of this should be direct engagement. Senior leaders and VPs need direct alignment before the message moves. That may require a live meeting where the executive owner says, this is the message, this is what is decided, this is what is pending. This is what we are not saying yet. This is what managers need. This is the next update date. That should not be left to scattered email interpretation. This is especially true when the change is sensitive. If the message could affect staffing, roles, reporting lines, schedules, compensation, customer commitments, compliance requirements, or major workflow, then senior alignment cannot be casual. Leaders need to hear the same language. They need to agree on the same boundaries. They need to know what not to say yet. That last part matters. A message can fracture not only from what leaders say, but from what they accidentally imply. Some parts should be real-time communication. Middle managers should get a pre-brief before they are expected to communicate with their teams. That pre-brief can happen live, especially if the change is sensitive or likely to generate questions. Managers need the chance to ask, what do we say if employees ask this? What is confirmed? What is not confirmed? Can we discuss timing? Where do questions go? Are we allowed to answer role-specific questions? What should we do if someone says they heard something different from another department? That real-time clarification protects the message before it hits the floor. It also shows respect to the managers. Do not make them find out with everyone else and then expect them to answer questions like they were prepared. That is not fair to them, and it is not good for the organization. Some parts should be asynchronous communication. The company still needs a written source of truth, a message tracker, a leader brief, an internal page, a formal memo, something managers can return to, something employees can reference, something that prevents the message from relying only on memory. Asynchronous communication is useful when the message needs to be stable, searchable, and consistent. The written source matters because verbal communication drifts. People remember different pieces, they miss parts, they hear tone differently, they summarize, they paraphrase, they add context. That is normal. The written source keeps everyone tethered to the same confirmed message. For tasking, the executive owner should not delegate message ownership vaguely. This needs clear tasking. Who owns the core message? Who owns function-specific translation? Who owns manager brief development? Who owns frontline delivery? Who owns question capture? Who owns updates? Who owns correction if the wrong version spreads? So that is TMC in practice. It is not only send the message, it is assign the communication work, choose the right communication method, and protect the chain from drift. The most useful TMC structure for this case is simple. Direct engagement for executive alignment, real-time communication for manager pre-briefs, asynchronous communication for the source of truth, supervised tasking for department-level translation, Direct engagement again. If the message involves sensitive staff impact, legal concern, safety concern, or high trust risk. Let me make that practical. Executive alignment might be a 30-minute live discussion with the C-suite and VP level. The output is not feelings. The output is a core message. One paragraph on why. One paragraph on what. One paragraph on who is affected. One paragraph on what is not changing. One paragraph on what remains pending. One sentence on when the next update comes. The manager pre-brief might be a live call or huddle before the broad announcement. The output is not just awareness, the output is manager readiness. Can managers explain the change in plain language? Can they answer the likely questions? Do they know what to escalate? Do they know what not to speculate on? Do they know where the official message lives? The source of truth might be an internal page or memo. The output is stability. When people hear 5 versions, leaders can say, use this as the current confirmed message. The question loop might be a shared intake method. The output is intelligence. Leaders learn what people are actually worried about, not just what leaders assume they would ask. That is how the company stops relying on hope. Now we move to PACE. PACE gives the organization a plan hierarchy: primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. This is where we build movement without pretending everything will go perfectly. The primary plan should be a controlled communication cascade. The core message starts with one executive owner. That message should answer what is changing, why it is changing, who is affected, what changes now, what does not change yet, what is still pending, and when the next update will come. Then the VP level translates the message for each function without changing the core. Operations may need one application. HR may need another. Customer-facing teams may need another. Finance may need another, but the core does not shift. Then middle managers receive a manager communication packet. That packet should include the approved message, the frontline version, talking points, likely questions, answers they are allowed to give, questions they should escalate, language they should avoid, and the location of the source of truth. Then frontline workers receive the message from their direct leader with the written source available for reference. Then questions move back up through a defined loop. That is the primary plan. The primary plan is not complicated. It is disciplined. It says the message does not get thrown into the organization and left to survive on its own. It moves in sequence. It has an owner. It has a written anchor. It has manager preparation. It has feedback. It has correction. The alternate plan is for when leadership does not have all final details yet. In that case, use a holding message. The holding message should not be empty. It should say, here is what is confirmed. Here is what is not confirmed yet. Here is what has not changed. Here is what we need you to continue doing. Here is where questions go. Here is when the next update will be provided. This gives managers a safe message to carry without pretending all answers exist. The holding message is important because many organizations make one of 2 mistakes. They either say too much too early and create confusion, or they say nothing until everything is complete and create rumor space. The holding message is the middle ground. It keeps control without overpromising. The contingency plan is for when multiple stories are already circulating. This is the rumor reset. It should be calm and direct. We know different versions of this change are circulating. To reduce confusion, this is the current confirmed information. Anything outside this message should be treated as unconfirmed until updated through the official channel. That does not accuse anyone. It restores control. And the tone matters here. Do not say, people are spreading misinformation, unless you are sure that is what is happening and you need to say it. Most of the time, a calmer phrase works better. Different versions are circulating. That is enough. It names the problem without attacking people. The emergency plan is for high-risk message failure. If the communication gap could create legal risk, safety risk, staffing panic, customer impact, compliance exposure, or major operational disruption, the company should issue one approved statement, pause informal messaging, require leaders to use the same language, and create a rapid question intake process. This should not be used for every issue. But when risk is high, loose communication is not acceptable. That is PACE, primary controlled cascade, alternate holding message and contingency, rumor reset, emergency, single approved statement, and pause informal messaging. Now we move to brain. Brain stress tests the plan before the organization commits to it. Benefits. The benefit of the controlled cascade is alignment. Middle managers get a message they can carry. Frontline workers get more consistency. Senior leaders reduce message drift. The organization separates confirmed and pending information. Questions get captured. Trust has a better chance of holding because people are not left to build meaning from fragments. Another benefit is speed over time. It may feel slower at first to pre-brief managers and write a source of truth, but it can save time after the message lands. Fewer repeated questions, fewer corrections, less rumor control, less manager improvisation, less rework, better execution. Another benefit is credibility. When leaders can say, here is the official current message, people may not love the change, but they have a stable place to stand. That matters. Agreement and clarity are not the same. A person can disagree with a change and still understand it. That is far better than disagreeing with something they do not even fully understand. Risks. The first risk is speed. A controlled cascade can feel slower than just sending a broad announcement. Leadership may worry that pre-briefing managers delays movement, but the counterpoint is simple. A fast, unclear message may cost more time later. Rework, rumor control, distrust, repeated clarification, and inconsistent execution can all become more expensive than a short manager pre-brief. The second risk is over-control. If the message feels too scripted, managers may sound robotic or evasive. The answer is not to abandon talking points. The answer is to give managers clear language and enough context to sound human. Managers need usable words, not handcuffs. The third risk is incomplete information. If leaders wait until every detail is final, communication may come too late. That is why the holding message matters. Clear does not mean complete. Clear means the audience knows what is confirmed, what is pending, what to do now, and when the next update comes. The fourth risk is credibility if the organization does not maintain the rhythm. If leadership says there will be an update Friday, then Friday needs an update, even if the update is there are no new confirmed changes yet. That still matters. A missed update teaches people not to trust the cadence. Alternatives. The company could keep using normal channels and hope the message evens out. That is weak. The company could centralize all communication from the C-suite only. That may create authority, but it may not answer frontline practical questions. The company could let each department explain the change independently. That may create speed, but it increases inconsistency. The controlled cascade is stronger because it protects both authority and local translation. Another alternative is to let managers answer based on their best judgment. That may work in low-risk situations, but for large sweeping changes, it is too loose. Managers need judgment, yes, but they also need boundaries. Strong managers do not need freedom to invent the message. They need enough clarity to carry the message well. Information. What information is still needed? The organization needs to know who owns the message, which parts of the change are final, which parts are pending, which groups are affected first, what questions managers are already receiving, what rumors are already circulating, and what timeline employees can reasonably expect for updates. Without that, even a good communication package may be too thin, need for time or negotiation. This plan may require negotiation upward. The person who submitted this may need to ask the VP level for permission to build or request a manager-ready communication packet. They may need to ask for a pre-brief before the next broad update. They may need to negotiate a question loop. They may need to say respectfully, we can carry the message better if we are given the message in a form that can be carried. That line matters. We can carry the message better if we are given the message in a form that can be carried. That is not accusation. That is operational truth. Now let's bring this together. The problem is not simply that people are talking too much. The The problem is that the company does not appear to have enough control over how the message is created, translated, delivered, questioned, updated, and corrected. That is why middle management is carrying the burden. They are being asked to turn moving information into stable team guidance. That is hard to do without a source of truth. So the recommendation is this: build the communication control package. One executive owner for the message, one source of truth, one manager pre-brief, one frontline version, one list of confirmed information, one list of pending information, one set of manager talking points, one question escalation path, one update cadence, one correction method when message drift appears. That is the practical answer. And for the person who submitted this, here is how I would communicate it upward. I want to make sure we are supporting the change and carrying the message accurately. Right now, middle managers are hearing multiple versions, and that creates risk when we communicate to staff. We need one approved source of truth, a manager-ready message packet, and a question escalation path, so frontline teams receive clear, consistent information. This will help us move forward without creating confusion or accidental message drift. That is strong. That is respectful. That is hard to dismiss because it is not emotional. It does not blame the C-suite. It does not blame VPs. It does not blame managers. It names the operational risk and offers a control. Here's another way to say it, a little more direct. I am not asking to slow the change down. I am asking to strengthen how we carry it. Right now, the message is not stable enough for managers to repeat with confidence. If we give managers one approved message, a clear source of truth, and a question path, we can reduce confusion and support the rollout more effectively. That is useful language. It respects leadership pressure. It respects the need to move. It does not accuse anyone. It asks for the operating control. Now, how should middle managers communicate down? They should keep it clean. Here is what is confirmed. Here is what is not confirmed yet. Here's what changes now. Here is what does not change today. Here is what I need you to keep doing. Here is where I am sending questions. Here's when I expect to update you again. That is the phrase. If a frontline worker asks a question the manager cannot answer, the manager should not guess. They should say, "That is a fair question. I do not have a confirmed answer yet. I am sending that through the question channel, and I will update the team when we get the official response." That protects trust. People can handle "I do not know yet" better than they can handle a confident answer that changes 3 times. That line is important because a lot of managers think credibility means having every answer. It does not. Credibility means being clear about what is known, honest about what is not known, and disciplined enough not to invent certainty. A manager can say, "I know this is uncomfortable. I am not going to speculate. I am going to keep you updated through the official message path, and I'm going to send your questions upward so they are answered cleanly." That is leadership. Not dramatic, not defensive, controlled. There are a few warning signs I would watch closely. If managers are using different explanations for the same change, the message is not controlled. If frontline workers are hearing major updates from peers before their managers, the timing is broken. If leaders keep saying, "Well, we already told them," but managers cannot explain the message in plain language, delivery happened but understanding did not. If the same questions keep repeating with no official answer, the feedback loop is missing. If managers are afraid to communicate because they do not want to be wrong, they need approved language, not another reminder to communicate. If employees keep asking whether something is final, confirmed, and pending information are probably mixed together. If different departments are preparing for different versions of the same change, the organization is no longer aligned. And if leadership keeps moving forward while the people responsible for carrying the message remain unclear, the organization is creating avoidable resistance. Not because people hate change, because people do not know what is happening, what it means, or what they are supposed to do next. That is the core leadership lesson in this mailbag. Fractured communication is not solved by more noise. It is solved by controlled messaging. Clear does not mean every answer is available. Clear means people know what is confirmed, what is pending, what changes now, what stays the same, what to do next, where questions go, and when the next update comes. That is the standard. And now I want to make this practical one more time before we close. If you are in middle management and you are living this situation right now, Do not walk into the next leadership conversation with only frustration. Frustration may be justified, but it is not enough. Walk in with structure. Say, I want to support the change. To do that well, I need the message in a form I can carry. Then ask for 5 things. What is confirmed? What is pending? What should I say to my team? What should I not speculate on? Where do I send questions I cannot answer? That is the minimum. If you can get more, ask for the manager packet. Ask for the source of truth. Ask for the next update date. Ask for the question loop. Ask who owns the message. But start there. And when you communicate down, do not turn uncertainty into theater. Do not make the team feel like you know more than you do. Do not hint. Do not wink. Do not say, I probably should not say this, but that kind of communication destroys message control. It may make people feel included for a minute, but it creates a new story that somebody else has to clean up. Stay clean. Stay honest. Stay inside what is confirmed. Capture what is not answered, then follow up. The follow-up matters. If a manager says, I will take that question up, then the manager needs to follow up, even if the answer is still pending. The team needs to know the question did not disappear. That is how trust is protected during uncertainty. To senior leaders and VPs, the lesson is just as direct. Do not expect middle managers to carry a message they have not been equipped to carry. They are not just distribution points. They are translators of meaning. They are the layer where strategy becomes practical. If they are confused, the organization will be confused. If they are forced to improvise, the message will drift. If they are excluded from the pre-brief, they will start behind. If they do not have a question path, frontline uncertainty will either stay local or turn into rumor. That does not mean every decision has to be made by committee. It means communication needs an operating sequence. Executive intent, functional translation, manager readiness, frontline delivery, question capture, update rhythm, correction when needed. That is the chain. If any part of that chain is missing, the message weakens. And I want to close by going back to the person who submitted this. Thank you for bringing it forward. You named a real leadership problem without turning it into a personal attack, and that matters. You are seeing the burden middle management carries when strategic change meets frontline reality. That burden is real, and the answer is not for middle managers to absorb 5 different stories and somehow make them sound aligned. The answer is to give them a message system strong enough to carry the change. For everyone listening, this is exactly why the Direct Action Mailbag exists. Real leadership problems are rarely clean. They involve pressure, incomplete information, real people, competing levels of responsibility and consequences if the read is wrong. The goal is not to accuse faster. The goal is to see better, sort the problem, and move with control. If you are stuck on a leadership, operations, or decision-making challenge, send it in. Give me the role, the environment, the pressure, the conflict, and the consequence. Tell me what is happening, who is affected, what has been tried, what constraints are in play, what decision you are trying to make, and what a good outcome would look like. That gives us enough to build a useful read. For this situation, the final answer is direct. Do not let middle management carry 5 versions of the same change. Do not let the front line build meaning from fragments. Do not let silence become the communication plan. Assess the situation. Choose the right problem navigation path. Understand the risk. Challenge the assumptions. Control the tasking and communication. Build the pace plan. Stress test the decision with brain. Then move. One source, one message. One question path, one update rhythm. Clear up, clear down. Move with control. Thanks for listening.